The kingdom of Mvuleni was a land of warmth and abundance, where golden fields stretched endlessly and rivers shimmered under the sun like silver snakes. Laughter filled the air, and music danced through the streets, a true reflection of the kindness and wisdom of its ruler, King Jembe. He was a man loved by his people, known not for his strength in battle, but for his heart, a heart that beat strongest for his beloved wife and their only daughter, Naila. Naila was the light of the kingdom, a girl whose spirit was as gentle as the wind and as bright as the morning sun. She moved through the streets freely, smiling at farmers, playing with children, and helping the elderly without a second thought. Her mother had taught her that a kind heart was the greatest gift one could offer the world, a lesson she carried with her even after her mother fell ill and passed away. The king was left shattered. His once joyful eyes grew heavy with sorrow, and the halls of the palace, once filled with warmth and laughter, became cold and quiet. Though Naila stayed by his side, comforting him in every way her small heart knew how, the weight of his grief seemed unshakable. The people of Mvuleni mourned alongside their king, but they too feared for the kingdom. A ruler's sadness, they whispered, could one day become his kingdom's weakness. It was during this time that Lady Zuberi entered their lives. She arrived from a distant noble family, bringing with her soft words and a comforting smile that seemed to ease the king's pain. She spoke to him with understanding, touched his hand with gentle fingers, and told him that a strong kingdom needed a strong queen. And slowly, bit by bit, the light returned to King Jembe's eyes. He believed Naila needed a mother, and the kingdom needed a queen, and Lady Zuberi seemed to offer both. The wedding was grand, celebrated by all of Mvuleni. People cheered, hoping that this new queen would restore the joy that had been lost. Lady Zuberi stood beside the king, her smile warm and inviting, her beauty undeniable. But only Naila noticed the way that smile never quite reached her eyes. There was something cold hidden beneath that pleasant face, something Naila couldn't yet name but felt in her bones. The moment the celebrations ended, Lady Zuberi's sweetness faded like morning mist. Her voice, once soft and kind in front of the people, turned sharp and cruel behind closed doors. She looked at Naila, not with the affection of a mother, but with a flicker of hatred, as though the very sight of her was a thorn in her side. "You walk around this palace like you own it," she sneered one evening when the king wasn't around. "Let me make one thing clear, little girl. You are not special. You're nothing more than a burden, and burdens belong beneath the feet of their betters." Naila's heart sank, but she didn't argue. Her mother had taught her to meet cruelty with kindness, but each day it grew harder. Lady Zuberi wasted no time taking control of the palace, whispering into the king's ear, twisting his grief into something she could control. The king, blinded by his need for comfort, listened to her more each day. He didn't notice how Naila's beautiful dresses were replaced with rags, or how the servants who once adored her now looked away in fear of the queen's wrath. Lady Zuberi's smile remained for the kingdom to see, but for Naila, it was gone forever. Only the cruelty remained. The moment the last lantern burned out, and the final song of the wedding feast faded into silence, Lady Zuberi's mask began to slip. The warm, gentle smile that had charmed the kingdom disappeared like smoke in the wind. No longer pretending, she looked at Naila not with kindness, but with eyes filled with something cold and sharp, something that felt like hate. The sweet words she once spoke in front of the king were gone, replaced with a voice as bitter as poison. "You think you're special, don't you?" Zuberi hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Parading around the palace like a little princess, waiting for your father to hand you the kingdom one day. You're nothing but a spoiled little mouse, unworthy of a crown, unworthy of anything." Naila froze, her heart thudding in her chest. This wasn't the woman her father married. This wasn't the woman who had smiled and promised to love her like a mother. That woman had been a lie. The real Zuberi stood before her now, and her gaze burned with cruelty. From that day on, everything changed. Zuberi wasted no time making sure Naila knew her place, a place far beneath her. The beautiful clothes Naila once wore, gifts from her father, were ripped away and replaced with rough, itchy rags. Her warm, sunlit bedroom with its soft bed and colourful tapestries was taken too. She was forced to sleep in a small dark room near the kitchen, where the smell of smoke and old food clung to the air. The servants, once Nyla's friends who laughed and played with her, now avoided her eyes. Zuberi made it clear that anyone caught helping the spoiled little mouse would lose their job, or worse. The cooks no longer set aside sweet honey cakes for her. The maids no longer braided her hair. She was alone. But Zuberi wasn't done. She wanted Nyla to suffer, to break. She gave her the hardest, dirtiest chores in the palace. Each morning, before the sun even rose, Nyla was forced to scrub the marble floors until her hands were raw and blistered. She carried heavy buckets of water from the well, her arms trembling with each step. Zuberi would watch her sometimes, standing tall and proud in her fine silk gowns, a cruel smirk tugging at her lips. "You look more fit and like this," she would sneer, a little mouse scurrying around in the dirt. Nyla tried to be strong. She remembered her mother's words, to meet cruelty with kindness. But every day, Zuberi seemed to find new ways to break her spirit. She would trip her in the hallways, then laugh as Nyla scrambled to gather whatever she dropped. She would whisper lies to the king, telling him Nyla was lazy and disobedient, slowly turning him against his daughter. The worst part wasn't the chores or the insult. It was the way her father, once so full of love and warmth, seemed to look right through her now. Zuberi's poison worked its way into his heart, and soon he barely noticed Nyla at all. Still, Nyla refused to cry where Zuberi could see her. She wouldn't give her the satisfaction. But at night, alone in the dark, she would press her face into a pillow and let the tears fall, wondering if her mother could see her from the stars, and if she could, why she wasn't coming to save her. Zuberi didn't just want Nyla gone. She wanted to erase her completely, but she was smart, too smart to strike all at once. She knew the king's heart still held love for his daughter, even if he was too blinded by grief to see what was happening. So Zuberi started her attack quietly, like a snake slithering through the shadows. Each day, she whispered little things into the king's ear, planting seeds of doubt. She spoke softly, her voice dripping with concern, pretending to care about Nyla. "She's kind, yes," Zuberi would sigh, tilting her head as if sad. "But kindness alone cannot rule a kingdom. The world is harsh, my love. What happens to Mvuleni when a soft heart leads? The people need strength, not a little girl who cries for the poor and feeds beggars." At first, the king resisted. He loved his daughter. He told Zuberi that Nyla had a heart like her mother's, gentle and full of light. But Zuberi was patient. Each night she tried again, her words like slow, steady poison. She reminded him how weak Nyla looked now, covered in dirt and rags, not like a future queen, but like a servant. "She isn't strong enough," Zuberi would whisper. "I know you love her, but love won't protect the kingdom from enemies. They will see her kindness as weakness. They will take everything from her, from you. Do you want to see her suffer like that? To lose everything because she wasn't ready?" The king's heart, still broken from his first wife's death, began to bend under the weight of Zuberi's words. He didn't realize he was changing. He didn't see how, day by day, he looked at Nyla less and less. But Zuberi did, and she smiled. She didn't stop there. It wasn't enough for the king to doubt Nyla. Everyone had to doubt her. The palace once adored the princess, but Zuberi worked in the shadows to turn them against her. She whispered to the servants that Nyla thought she was better than them, that she laughed behind their backs and called them useless. She told the royal guards that Nyla was weak and foolish, that protecting her would one day cost them their lives. She even spread rumors among the noble families, hinting that perhaps Nyla wasn't fit to be queen after all. Slowly, everything shifted. People stopped looking at Nyla with warmth and started looking at her with pity, or worse, indifference. The servants stopped speaking to her unless they had to, their once friendly smiles replaced with stiff nods. The guards barely glanced her way. Even her friends, the children of nobles, who once played in the gardens with her, stopped inviting her to their games and dinners. They whispered behind her back now, repeating the poison Zuberi had planted. Nyla didn't understand why. She tried to speak to her father, to sit by his side like she used to, but he was always busy now, always too tired, too distracted. When he did look at her, his eyes seemed distant, as if he were looking at a stranger. One night, she finally gathered the courage to ask him, her voice trembling, "Baba, do you still believe I'll make a good queen one day?" The king looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he sighed, his voice low and heavy. "Naila, the world is cruel. Kindness isn't always enough." Her heart shattered. He didn't say no, but he didn't say yes either, and somehow that hurt even more. Zuberi had won the battle without ever raising her voice. Naila was still in the palace, but she had never felt so far away from everyone she loved. She wasn't a princess anymore. She was a ghost. Zuberi watched Naila closely, and despite everything, the cruel words, the back-breaking chores, the isolation, the girl still refused to break. No matter how much pain Zuberi inflicted, there was a quiet fire in Naila's eyes that wouldn't go out. She smiled at the few servants who still glanced her way. She whispered prayers for her father's health each night, and she still looked at the people of Mvuleni with love, even when they no longer looked back. That fire, that hope, made Zuberi furious. Naila wasn't supposed to endure. She was supposed to give up. Realizing her whispers and lies weren't enough, Zuberi knew it was time for something far worse. If Naila wouldn't break, she would make her disappear forever. But it couldn't look like a murder or a banishment. No, the kingdom still remembered Naila as their sweet, kind princess, and Zuberi needed to keep her own hands clean. The people had to believe this was a blessing, a gift to the kingdom. So she crafted a new plan, one that was as brilliant as it was merciless. Late one night, Zuberi sat beside the king, her voice low and dripping with false concern. "My love, I fear for Naila's future. She's too soft, too gentle. She has no allies, no strength to lead. But perhaps she doesn't need to rule Mvuleni. Perhaps her future lies elsewhere, with someone strong enough to protect her from this cruel world." The king, weary and worn, looked at her with tired eyes. "What do you mean?" Zuberi leaned in closer, her voice a soothing whisper. "Chief Baraka, he's powerful, respected, a man feared across all kingdoms. He's looking for a wife." King Jembe frowned. Everyone knew of Chief Baraka, an aging warlord with a reputation for brutality. His name alone made warriors tremble. He ruled his lands with iron and fire, leaving ruin wherever he went. He wasn't a man known for mercy. Zuberi pressed on before the king could protest. "Think of it, my king. Baraka's strength combined with Mvuleni's peace. No kingdom would dare challenge us. Naila would be safe. She may not be strong enough to rule, but she could still serve her people by creating an alliance that protects us all." The king hesitated. His heart told him this wasn't right. But Zuberi had spent months twisting his mind. He no longer trusted his own judgment, only hers. Slowly, painfully, he nodded. "If it keeps us safe, then it must be done." Zuberi smiled, her heart cold and satisfied. The next morning, Naila was called to the throne room. She came, dressed in the same rags Zuberi had forced upon her, her hair unkempt and her hands red from scrubbing the palace floors. Still, her spirit hadn't dimmed. She walked in with her head high, hoping her father had finally called her to make things right. But when she heard his words, her heart stopped. "You are to be married," the king said, his voice distant, "to Chief Baraka." For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Naila couldn't breathe. Baraka. She had heard the stories. The villages burned to ashes. The people who vanished. The wives who were never seen again. He wasn't a man. He was a monster, wrapped in armor. "Baba, please," she begged, tears filling her eyes. "Don't send me to him. He's cruel. He hurts people." The king looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Zuberi stepped forward instead, her voice smooth as silk. "This is for the good of the kingdom, Naila. You should be grateful. A little mouse like you could never rule, but you can still serve your people in another way." Naila's knees trembled, but she didn't fall. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. "I am your daughter. How can you do this to me?" The king said nothing. Zuberi leaned in close, her breath hot against Naila's ear, and whispered so only she could hear. "No one wants you here, little mouse. You should have given up when you had the chance." Naila stared ahead, her heart pounding in her chest. The fire inside her flickered dangerously low, but it didn't go out. Not yet. not ever. The palace that once felt like home now felt like a prison. Zuberi's shadow seemed to follow her everywhere, and her father, the man who once held her close and promised to protect her from all the evils of the world, barely looked at her anymore. The whispers of her arranged marriage to Chief Baraka grew louder, and fear settled deep in her bones. One night, long after the torches in the halls were snuffed out, Naila wandered to the edge of the grand staircase, where she could just barely hear voices from the throne room below. Zuberi's voice slithered through the air, soft but filled with venom. "She will be gone by week's end," Zuberi said, her tone smooth and confident. "Chief Baraka expects her without delay. The girl has no choice. Once she's his, she'll be far from Mvuleni, far from you. She's weak, Djembe. Let her go." Naila's heart pounded so loudly she thought they might hear it. The truth was clearer than ever now. This wasn't about alliances or protecting the kingdom. Zuberi didn't want her married off to secure peace. She wanted her gone, forever. Tears burned in Naila's eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't stay. She couldn't let them send her to a life of misery, chained to a man who was feared by all. Death would be kinder. Her mother had once told her that freedom was worth any price. And now, Naila understood what she meant. That night, she didn't sleep. She waited, listening to the palace fall into deep, peaceful silence. When the last guard's footsteps faded into the distance, she moved. Her hands trembled as she gathered what little she had. An old cloak and a small loaf of bread stolen from the kitchen. Her stomach twisted with fear, but her mind was set. She couldn't stay. The moon hung high and cold in the sky as she slipped out through the servants' corridor, her bare feet silent against the stone floor. She didn't dare breathe too loudly. Every shadow felt like Zuberi watching her, waiting to drag her back. But she kept going, faster and faster, until she felt the night air hit her face. She didn't stop running. The palace disappeared behind her, the grand towers shrinking into the distance. Her legs burned, her throat ached, but she didn't stop. The only thing that mattered was getting far enough away that Zuberi would never find her again. Ahead of her loomed the Nyoka forest, a place so feared by the people of Mvuleni that parents used it to scare children into behaving. They spoke of spirits that roamed between the trees, of serpents as long as rivers and beasts, with eyes that glowed in the dark. No one who entered Nyoka forest ever came back. But for Naila, it wasn't a choice. She couldn't go back, and the thought of becoming Baraka's bride was worse than whatever waited for her inside the forest. The trees seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, their branches twisting like clawed hands. The wind whistled through the leaves, sounding almost like a warning. The ground beneath her was uneven and cold, rocks biting into her feet with every step. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her body screaming for rest, but fear kept her moving. The forest swallowed her whole, the light of the moon barely piercing through the thick canopy above. The air felt different here, heavier, thicker, like the trees themselves were watching. Every rustle, every snap of a twig made her heart race. Still, she pushed forward. Even if the forest was filled with monsters, she told herself, they couldn't be worse than the one she had left behind. Naila's legs felt like they were made of stone. Each step through the dense, tangled forest was harder than the last. Her breath came in short, shaky gasps, her throat dry and burning. Branches clawed at her skin, leaving angry red scratches on her arms and legs. Her stomach twisted with hunger, and the stale bread she had stolen from the palace was long gone. Her body ached with exhaustion, but fear pushed her forward. She didn't dare stop. The forest was alive with sound, unfamiliar, frightening sound. Twigs snapped in the distance, and strange howls echoed through the trees. The moon was hidden now, swallowed by the thick branches above, leaving her in near total darkness. Her heart pounded louder than her footsteps, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled from the shadows behind her. Naila froze. Her chest tightened, her lungs refusing to pull in air. Slowly, she turned her head. Glowing eyes stared back at her. Not one pair, but several, circling her, closing in. Wolves. Their silhouettes moved like shadows, silent and deadly. Their fur blended with the night, but their eyes burned like amber flame. Nayla's heart screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. The largest wolf stepped forward, baring its teeth. Its snarl made her skin prickle with terror. She stumbled back, her voice trembling. "Please, no!" The wolf lunged. Before she could even blink, something moved faster than the wind. A blur of dark fabric and sharp steel erupted from the shadows. A man, tall, swift, and fierce, stepped between her and the wolves. His sword sliced through the air with a deadly whistle, and the wolf yelped, leaping back. The others hesitated, growling in confusion. The stranger didn't hesitate. He moved like he wasn't human, his strikes faster than her eyes could follow. His strength was unnatural, his movements smooth and precise, as if he had fought creatures like this 1,000 times before. The wolves didn't stand a chance. One by one, they retreated, vanishing into the darkness. Silence fell. Nayla's knees gave out, and she collapsed to the ground, her chest heaving. She stared at the stranger, her vision blurred with tears and exhaustion. He stood tall, his face hidden beneath a hood, his sword glinting faintly in the dim light. His breathing was calm, steady, like saving her had cost him nothing at all. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "You shouldn't be here." Nayla flinched. His voice was deep, but not unkind. There was something in it, a quiet strength, maybe even a trace of sadness. I had no choice," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The stranger studied her for a moment longer. His eyes, though shadowed by his hood, seemed to soften. He knelt beside her, his movements surprisingly gentle for someone who fought like a warrior. "You're running from something," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. He already knew. Nayla swallowed the lump in her throat, tears burning in her eyes. "Someone." The stranger was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're safe now." For the first time in what felt like forever, Nayla believed it. Nayla sat by the crackling fire Malik had built, her body aching and her mind racing. The warmth felt like a distant memory after the cold, unforgiving forest. But even the flames couldn't chase away the weight in her heart. She was safe for now, but her father wasn't. Zuberi's face haunted her every time she closed her eyes. The way she smiled sweetly in front of the king, only to turn cruel when no one else was watching. Nayla knew the truth now. Zuberi wouldn't stop until she controlled everything, and her father was too blinded by grief and manipulation to see it. Malik sat across from her, silent, his sharp eyes watching the flames. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, strong, calm, and mysterious. He had saved her without hesitation, fought off wolves like it was nothing, and now he stayed. He didn't ask who she was or why she was running. It was like he already knew. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "The woman you're running from, she won't stop." His voice was low, steady, but there was something in it, a sadness that felt familiar to Nayla. "She won't stop until my father is hers completely," Nayla whispered, her voice shaking. "She's poisoned his mind. He doesn't even look at me the same anymore." Malik looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "There's a place, the Mountain of Spirit. It's not far from here, but the path is dangerous. It's said that those who survive the journey come back stronger than they ever were before, strong enough to face whatever stands in." Nayla stared at him, her heart pounding. Strong enough. That's what she needed to. She wasn't a queen. She wasn't even a princess anymore. She was just a girl, broken and scared. But she couldn't stay that way. Her father needed. Mveleni needed her, and she couldn't let Zuberi win. "I have to go," she said, her voice filled with newfound determination. "I have to save him. I have to save my kingdom." Malik studied her for a long moment, and then, slowly, he nodded. "Then The next morning they set off before the sun could rise. The world felt different now, the air heavier, the sky darker. Nyla's legs still ached, her body still screamed for rest, but she didn't stop. Malik moved like a shadow beside her, quiet and steady. He didn't talk much, but somehow his silence made her feel safe. The path twisted through endless stretches of forest, rocky cliffs and rivers that roared like angry beasts. Nyla lost count of how many times she slipped, how many times her knees hit the ground. Each time, Malik was there, pulling her back up without a word. They crossed a narrow bridge that swayed dangerously over a canyon so deep she couldn't see the bottom. They climbed steep cliffs where the wind howled and tried to tear them down. They walked through thick fog that swallowed the world whole, making it impossible to tell where the ground ended and the sky began. Nyla was afraid, more than she had ever been. But every time her fear threatened to pull her under, she thought of her father's face. She thought of the way he used to laugh, the way he called her his little light. She remembered the warmth of his arms when she was a child, how he promised he would always protect her. He had saved her so many times. Now it was her turn. Malik seemed to sense the fire in her heart growing stronger. He walked beside her, silent but unwavering, like he believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Nyla didn't feel like a broken girl anymore. She felt like a warrior. The mountain of spirits loomed before them, its jagged peak slicing into the sky like a blade. The air was thin and cold, and each breath felt like fire in Nyla's lungs. Her body ached, her feet were raw and blistered, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Malik walked beside her, silent as ever, though his eyes flicked to her every so often, watching, waiting. He didn't need to ask if she was sure. He could see it in her eyes. She wouldn't turn back. They reached an ancient stone archway at the base of the mountain. Strange markings carved into the rock glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The wind around them fell silent. It was too quiet, too still, as if even the world itself was afraid to disturb this place. Malik stopped. "From here, you walk alone." Nyla swallowed hard. She wanted to ask him to come with her. His presence felt like a shield against the fear that twisted in her stomach. But deep down, she knew this was something she had to face on her own. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll come back." She stepped through the archway. The world shifted. The cold mountain air vanished, replaced by suffocating heat. The ground beneath her was no longer stone but sand, endless and burning beneath her feet. The sky blazed red, and in the distance, she heard it, her father's voice, calling her name. "Baba!" She breathed, spinning around. There he was, standing just beyond the dunes. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. But he reached for her, his voice broken and desperate. "Nyla, help me." Her heart twisted painfully. She ran to him, sand flying beneath her feet. She was so close, just a few more steps. When the sand shifted beneath him, his body began to sink. "Baba!" she screamed, diving forward. His face twisted into something else. Something dark, hollow, wrong. His voice changed, warped and cruel. "You can't save him. You'll never be strong enough." Nyla froze. Her whole body trembled. This wasn't her father. This was fear. Her fear. It wanted her to give up, to believe she wasn't enough. But she wasn't that helpless little girl anymore. She clenched her fists, tears burning in her eyes. "You're not real," she said through gritted teeth. "I will save him." The vision shattered like glass. She fell to her knees, gasping for air, but the sand was gone. The heat vanished. She was somewhere new now, a vast, endless lake stretching out in all directions, so still it looked like a mirror. Nyla stood, her reflection staring back at her, but it wasn't the girl she knew. This Nyla was older, her eyes colder, her face hard and unfeeling. This was who she could become, a queen without mercy, a ruler who let her pain turn her heart to stone. A voice echoed from the water, soft but powerful. "If you had Zuberi's power, would you show her mercy?" Nyla's throat tightened. The image of Zuberi's cruel smile burned in her mind. The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal, it all begged her to say no, to let her suffer. But then Nyla thought of her mother, of her father, of the kingdom her mother loved so dearly. Mvuleni didn't need another tyrant. It needed a queen who knew mercy, even for those who didn't deserve it. "Yes," Nyla said, her voice steady. "I would." The lake rippled and disappeared. She stood now on a mountaintop bathed in golden light. Before her, towering figures of shimmering light appeared, the spirits of the mountain. Their voices spoke as one, ancient and powerful. "You have faced fear and overcome it. You have faced loss and chosen mercy. You are worthy." A warm light enveloped her, and she felt something stir deep within her chest. A new strength, but not of muscle or bone. It was in her heart, in her mind, a power that pulsed with truth and clarity. "You shall see the truth in all hearts, to know who stands with you and who hides in shadows." But this gift is precious. Wield it with kindness, or it will burn you from within. The light faded. Nyla stood alone again, but she wasn't the same girl who entered. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The journey back to Mvuleni felt shorter than Nyla expected, though her heart pounded harder with each step. The kingdom she once called home was barely recognizable. The streets were quiet, the markets empty. The vibrant laughter and music that once filled the air were gone, replaced by fear and silence. People moved like shadows, heads down, avoiding each other's eyes. Zuberi's rule had smothered the kingdom's spirit. Malek walked beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Though he didn't speak, he didn't need to. Nyla's face was set with determination. She wasn't the broken girl who had fled in the night. She wasn't a frightened princess anymore. She was something more. And Zuberi was about to find out exactly what that meant. They slipped into the palace under the cover of darkness. The guards didn't even look her way. Zuberi had convinced everyone Nyla was dead. Why would they guard against a ghost? The halls felt colder, emptier than before. Her father's throne room, once filled with light and life, now felt like a tomb. The doors were wide open, and Nyla saw her father sitting on the throne. He looked older, his shoulders slumped, his face hollow. Beside him stood Zuberi, dressed in the finest silks, a crown perched arrogantly on her head. She smiled sweetly, her hand resting on the king's shoulder, like he was nothing more than a puppet. The court watched her in silent fear. Nyla stepped into the room, her voice clear and steady. "I am Nyla, daughter of King Djembe, and I am not dead." Gasps filled the room. The crowd parted like water, faces filled with shock and disbelief. Zuberi's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing in surprise, then anger. "This is impossible," Zuberi hissed, though her voice remained silky smooth. "The poor girl must be confused. You are not Nyla. Nyla died in the woods, running from her own kingdom like a coward." The king stared at her, his eyes distant and clouded. "Nyla!" His voice was barely a whisper, like he wasn't sure if he was seeing a dream. Nyla's heart ached, but she didn't falter. She stepped forward, her gaze locked on Zuberi. "I ran because you tried to sell me to Chief Baraka. I ran because you wanted me gone. But I came back, for my father, for my people, and for the truth." Zuberi laughed softly, shaking her head. "Lies. Wild stories from a scared little girl. Who would believe such nonsense?" Nyla didn't answer. She didn't need to. The gift the spirits had given her stirred within her chest, burning warm and steady. She focused on Zuberi, and the room seemed to fall away. Her vision blurred for a moment, then sharpened. Suddenly, she didn't see Zuberi's false smile or her expensive clothes. She saw the truth, a heart blackened by greed, twisting and curling with envy and hatred. And as Nyla stared, the truth spilled from Zuberi's own mouth, her voice trembling as if she couldn't stop herself. "I did it!" Zuberi's voice rang out, cold and sharp. "I poisoned the king's mind. I made him turn against his daughter. I wanted her gone. She was in my way." The court gasped again, louder this time. Whispers filled the air like a rising tide. Zuberi's face twisted with rage and panic. Her hands shook as if she couldn't believe her own betrayal had escaped her lips. The king's eyes cleared, and his face filled with horror. He looked at Zuberi like he was seeing her for the first time. You lied to me." His voice trembled, but it grew stronger with each word. "You turned me against my daughter. You stole my kingdom from under me." Zuberi stepped back, her face pale. "No, she's tricking you. She's using some kind of witchcraft." Nyla didn't look away. "The only magic here is the truth, Zuberi. And now everyone sees you for what you are." Guards stepped forward, their eyes no longer clouded by fear or Zuberi's lies. They grabbed her arms and she thrashed against them, screaming, "You can't do this! I am queen! I am queen!" But no one listened anymore. The king rose from his throne, his legs shaking. The sun rose gently over Mvuleni, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, as if the heavens themselves celebrated the kingdom's new beginning. The air felt different, lighter, freer, as though the weight of Zuberi's lies had finally been lifted. The people gathered outside the palace, their faces filled with hope and anticipation. Whispers of Nyla's return had spread like wildfire, and now they waited to see what would become of the woman who had brought their kingdom to its knees. Zuberi stood before the crowd, her wrists bound, her once perfect hair tangled and wild. The false sweetness that had once dripped from her voice was gone, replaced by raw, seething anger. Her eyes burned with hatred as she glared at Nyla, who stood tall and unwavering before her. The people watched in silence, waiting for their princess to deliver the final blow. "You think you've won?" Zuberi spat, her voice sharp and venomous. "You're a fool, Nyla. I built this kingdom stronger than it ever was. Without me, it will fall to ruin. You'll regret sparing me. All of you will." Nyla stared at her for a long moment, her heart steady. She could feel the weight of her people's expectations pressing down on her. They wanted justice. They wanted to see Zuberi pay for her cruelty, for the suffering she had caused. The old Nyla might have wanted that too, but she wasn't that girl anymore. "No," Nyla said, her voice clear and strong. "We won't become like you. Mvuleni will not be built on revenge and bloodshed. You are banished, Zuberi. Leave this kingdom and never return." The crowd murmured in surprise. Mercy wasn't what they expected, but as they looked at Nyla, they saw the strength in her decision. She wasn't weak. She was powerful in a way Zuberi could never understand. Zuberi's face twisted with fury. "You're a fool!" she shrieked. "One day you'll regret this." Nyla didn't flinch. "Maybe," she said calmly, "but I won't regret being better than you." Zuberi was dragged from the palace grounds, her screams fading into the distance. The people watched her go, and for the first time in a long while, they felt hope bloom in their hearts. The king, still weak but stronger than he had been in months, stepped forward. He placed a hand on Nyla's shoulder, his voice filled with pride. "You've saved us all, my daughter. Mvuleni is yours to lead now, and I know you will lead with a heart full of courage and mercy." Nyla's chest swelled with emotion, but before she could speak, Malik stepped forward. He had been silent through it all, watching her with that same quiet strength she'd come to rely on. "I'm not who you think I am," he said softly, his voice steady, but laced with something deeper, something more vulnerable. "My real name is Kwame. I am the prince of a neighboring kingdom. I left my home to find the truth about the world beyond my borders, to find someone worthy to stand beside. And I found you, Nyla." The crowd gasped, murmurs rising again. A prince. He had fought beside her, protected her, never once asking for recognition or reward. Nyla stared at him, her heart pounding. "You stayed," she whispered. Kwame smiled, warmth in his eyes. "I'd follow you anywhere." Nyla smiled back, tears shining in her eyes. She turned to her people, and raised her voice so they all could hear. "Mvuleni will no longer be ruled by fear. We will build a kingdom of strength, yes, but also kindness. We will stand together, as one." The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices echoing through the palace walls. The sun climbed higher, bathing the kingdom in light. And for the first time in a long, long time, Mvuleni felt alive again. Nyla wasn't a broken girl anymore. She wasn't just a princess or even a queen. She was a symbol of hope, a light that would guide her people into a new dawn.